Okay, good morning, everybody. We're just going to give everyone a little bit of time to join in. So we'll be kicking off in about 2 or 3 minutes. While people are waiting, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat and what land you're coming from today, would lovely to meet you all. Okay, B, I think we might get started. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nicole Nathan and I'm a research fellow at the University of Newcastle, and I am the stream lead for sustainability research within the National Centre of Implementation Science, which is a NHMRC Centre for Research Excellence. Today we're meeting on Aboriginal land. For me, it is Awabakal land here in beautiful Newcastle, which you can see on the back of my screen. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people we have here meeting with us today. So absolutely thrilled to have Dr. Elaine Toomey here with us today. She's a complete powerhouse. She's a beautiful person, and we've been working with Elaine for probably the last 6 or so years, and it's just such a delight to work with Elaine, anyone who knows her. Elaine is a lecturer in evidence-based healthcare at the University of Galway, program co-director for the Innovative Master of Science in Evidence-Based Future Healthcare, and a Health Research Board Applying Research into Policy and Practice Research Fellow. Anything I've got wrong here, Elaine, please correct me. Elaine served as the Associate Director of Cochrane Island, where she was leading the implementation of the Evidence Synthesis Island Fellowship Scheme. Man, that's hard to get your mouth around. But she has such diverse expertise across evidence synthesis, implementation science, health behaviour, and for those of you who knew a lot of her research was around fidelity. And her research really, focuses on maximising the impact of this interdisciplinary health research. So we're really excited to have her here. We're really excited to have her actually in Newcastle, and really thank her for giving us her time today. So Elaine, I will pass over to you. If people have questions along the way, feel free to pop them into the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. Otherwise, we've got time. We'll have time at the end, so you can ask them live if you like. So, Elaine, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Nick. Great. I'm just keep along here. Okay, great. So hi, everyone. As Nick said, I'm Elaine Toomey. I'm based at the University of Galway, which you can see here on the right-hand side. So this is the Quad building. It's one of the oldest buildings on campus. I don't know actually how old it is, but maybe 1800s or maybe 1900s, something like that anyway. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about, I'm just going to introduce myself and my current research. I'm going to mostly speak about the development of an evidence or a video-based evidence synthesis KT resource, and then just some final reflections that I've had since that project. And as Nick said, be delighted to have a chat after and answer any questions or even hear from you in terms of what you think or kind of future directions or things we could have done better. So always delighted to hear that. So As Nick said, I'm a lecturer and a programme co-director of the new Masters in Evidence-Based Future Healthcare in the University of Galway. I'm also a HRB Applying Research into Policy and Practice Fellow, and I'm a Cochrane Ireland Research Associate. And previously I was Associate Director of Cochrane Ireland, like Nick mentioned, which is where I did this project that I'm going to speak to you about mostly today. Okay, so just a little bit of background of where I'm from. So this is Galway Base, this is where I live, this is where the university is. So it's on the west coast of Ireland, for anyone who hasn't been there before. So just a quick note about this picture. The last time I was in Newcastle in 2018, I had this picture on my slide, and I think it was Chris Williams at the time afterwards said to me, yeah, great presentation. He was like, we don't need to see beaches. We have enough beaches. We're Newcastle, so we want to see old stuff. So for Chris's benefit, even though I don't think he's online, these are some of our nicer beaches. So this is Glassalawn Bay out in Connemara. This is Dogs Bay, which isn't too far from our house. And here's some old stuff for Chris. So at the top here, you can see this is Menlo Castle. This is a 16th century castle. I looked that up yesterday. So 16th century castle that faces the university. So there's a riverbank walk and you can see this from the university campus. Then on the left-hand side are the medieval streets in Galway, which is where I'm based. So it's a medieval city. The middle bit here at the bottom is our president at one of our we have a local theatre group called Macnas, and they kind of do a really special Halloween parade every year to celebrate the Celtic Festival of Samhain. And that's our president there being accosted by some giant from, I don't know, some sort of tradition. Anyway, and then on the bottom right is the Galway hooker, which is a traditional fishing boat from the west of Ireland that's been used for hundreds of years. So there you go, Chris, there's the old stuff. So always delighted to show people around Galway. If anybody's ever coming for a visit, please do look me up and I'll put you in touch and show you the nice place to eat and all that. So. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. So my overarching career goal is to improve population health and well-being by enhancing the implementation of research into policy and practice using insights from behavioural and implementation science. So I aim to achieve this through research, teaching and academic service activities across 3 specific strands. So by making health research more usable, relevant and better quality, so a health research methodology strand. By implementing evidence-based behavioural health interventions into policy and practice, so a behavioural and implementation science strand, and by developing more effective and efficient evidence ecosystem, so knowledge translation for policy practice and public strand. So just a snapshot of some of the research that I'm working on currently. So my fellowship from the HRB, so I'm PI on the Intrepid project. So that's about integrating research into public health decision making. So sorry, I'm just going to move this thing over here so I can see it better. And delighted that Professor Luke Wolfenden from the University of Newcastle is a co-applicant on this grant with me. The CESAR project is another project I'm working on. So it's one I'm leading about exploring consultation exercises and scoping reviews. So that's funded by Evidence Synthesis Ireland through their Study Within a Review award scheme. I'm working with a lot of fantastic people from Ireland, Canada and Australia, and some I'm sure you know quite well on this slide. This is a project that has been killing me. It's just dragged on for so long, but I'm very confident I'll have it finished by early 2024. So this is one that I'm delighted that Nick has been involved in. This is a scoping review of intervention fidelity frameworks and models. So it's one of those labours of love that you're not funded to do. So then maternity leave happens, change of career happens, and then it gets pushed to the side, but it's confident it's going to be finished soon. So okay, so the main project I'm going to speak to you about today is about when we developed a video animation KT resource to explain evidence synthesis. So as I mentioned, this is when I was working as Associate Director of Cochrane Ireland. So for anyone who hasn't come across Evidence Synthesis Ireland or Cochrane Ireland, the aim is to make evidence syntheses more usable in every sense of the word. So better designed, conducted and reported, more usable for decision makers and more usable within healthcare policy and clinical practice decision making across the island of Ireland and beyond. So when I was Associate Director, my kind of key roles were co-responsibility for the scientific direction of the group, to foster national awareness around evidence synthesis through targeted outreach and strategic communication, with particularly quite a public focusing role. So kind of really bringing evidence synthesis to the public mostly. So like most things, research is never as good or as fun if you're doing it on your own. So this is a quick snapshot of our team that was involved in this project with me. I'd like to particularly highlight Krista Liv, who was a second-year medical student at the time, who ESI funded with a summer studentship to work on this project with us. So he was a fantastic student to work with in the project. Okay, so just in terms of the context of the project, I suppose we've all fairly familiar with seeing this pop up on our internet. Nearly every day you log on, you see something like, oh, you can cure your cancer within 2 minutes if you just take this lemon drink, or during COVID, I think the whole hydroxychloroquine, however you pronounce that, all those kind of claims really definitely came to the fore during COVID. So I suppose we've seen this kind of increasing accessibility of health information, but also growing mis and disinformation on the internet. So with that in mind, I suppose we felt that there was a need for trustworthy knowledge translation resources for a public, so that they could help make informed decisions. And particularly in terms of understanding evidence synthesis, knowing that, okay, well, my decisions are not just based on one single study, but they're based on the totality of evidence brought together. So we felt that that was a really important thing for the members of the public to understand what it was in terms of how they can make decisions. However, the development of many KT resources are not evidence-based or is often unclear. And a lot of KT resources haven't been developed in collaboration with end users. So just an example of some good ones that have been. So this is My Asthma Diary by Mandy Archibald and her team, which is where they used a co-design process to develop this asthma diary, a KT resource. However, often those resources are explaining kind of clinical topics like asthma or diabetes or obesity, and they kind of rarely focus on methodological topics like evidence synthesis or trials or that type of thing. So some of the examples that have done this are the Informed Health Choices project. So one of the people in our team, Sarah Rosenbaum, worked on this project where they used a co-design, human-centered design approach to develop a KT resource explaining about informed health choices more broadly. So more of a methodological focus. So our aim was to develop a video-based knowledge translation resource to explain evidence synthesis to a public audience, but also in collaboration with those members of the public. So informed by Semikula et al., which is the paper that Sarah had been involved in, we chose to use a user-centered or human-centered design approach, which is where essentially you have iterative cycles of idea generation, prototyping, user testing, and analysis and refinement. So this diagram here just kind of shows the 2 rounds of user testing that we did. So starting in step 1, moving to step 2, 3, 4, then into 5, 6, 7 before our final version of the video was developed. So I'll go through each of those now in detail. So for the first step, the idea generation phase, again, we kind of felt we really wanted to kind of structure this first step and try and use, I suppose, a systematic process for this piece of it. So we use the KT Canada KT Planning Primer template. So this is where it helps you kind of, I suppose, identify who your audience is, what your message is, your objectives, the format, opportunities, resources, that type of thing. So we completed this in conjunction with 6 researchers, not part of the team, the authorship team, but outsourcing to them to work with them to help fill out this template. So they were researchers with expertise in evidence synthesis, in knowledge translation, and we also worked with one experienced patient and public involvement advocate. Okay, so the findings of that then, so once we had completed that template and worked with those people, it helped us to identify, okay, what are the key messages that we want to come through in this resource? So I identified that the key things we needed to come through were the importance of evidence synthesis, what it is, and then also how it can impact decision-making. And in that order, so we kind of felt that actually hooking them in terms of why it's important first was key, then explaining what it is, and then how it could impact decision-making. So the first round of prototyping then, so we took those kind of initial key messages in terms of what we wanted to convey in the resource, and then we storyboarded it and scripted it. So for example, so each of the storyboard showed sketches of each potential scene with verbal descriptions of kind of approximately what the visuals for each scene would look like. So scene by scene, covering across the three messages, sketching out what the visuals could potentially look like, and then starting to kind of script a bit of a narrative. We also then kind of picked out some potential animation style samples. So we had a felt motion one, or a felt animation style. We had a kind of a Morla or clay animation style. We had, I think, just simple kind of graphic and colors, so kind of a cartoony kind of style. And we had other ones as well. Okay, so that was our first prototype. Then what we did is we took that kind of initial prototype, which was the storyboard, the script, and those kind of animation styles, and we brought them then into a round of user testing. So for the user testing, we, through a mixture of convenience and snowball sampling, we identified 7 members of the public of varying ages and genders, and got them to have a look at that initial prototype and then do think aloud interviews. So basically, for anyone who hasn't done these before, it's essentially where a person kind of works through the resource, whether it's a video or reading, you know, a leaflet or whatever, and they're talking aloud their thoughts and their perceptions as they're working through it. And then there's a moderator there who's there taking notes from those interviews. So we did 7 of those with each of the members of the public, and they roughly lasted around 40 to 60 minutes each. We also then got them to fill out user experience questionnaires, which we developed based on a modified version of Peter Morville's Honeycomb framework. So that's the framework shown here, where there's different facets like valuable, how valuable is the resource, how useful is it for you, how usable, is it easy to use, desirable, accessible, credible, findable, how findable would the resource be. So some of those aspects we didn't feel were relevant at the time, so we picked out 4 specific components. So in terms of then what we found from that, so what the kind of the feedback and what we were getting from people was that they was mostly in terms of things like language use. So one person said, instead of saying a single research study, say a single piece of evidence. So then that helped us kind of refine the script there and those types of, in that type of way. Mostly people preferred the felt animation style. So that's what we decided to go with in terms of that. And then this was the user experience rating. So from those user experience questionnaires. So they rated a median of 9 in terms of usefulness, a median of 7 in terms of desirability, 9 in terms of value, and 9 in terms of credibility. So then what we did, we took those findings, we synthesized them all, and then we edited the script and the storyboard accordingly. And then we developed our second prototype, which was like a draft version of the actual animation itself. So with this one, we didn't have the felt animation style applied yet. So it was this kind of vector basic animation style that you see here on the right, so this kind of line drawing, but these were moving. So it was an actual video, but just with this kind of basic style. We also added the audio narration of the script over as well. So it was kind of a very close approximation of what the final video would be. So we then kind of played that for a new sample of 7 members of the public. So again, through convenience snowball sampling, another 7, again, spread of ages and genders. And then we did think aloud interviews with them and user experience questionnaires with them as well. So in the same way we had done previously. So the findings from that round were around recommendations around things like slowing down the speed of the visuals and the audio, rephrasing certain parts of the language again, and also kind of looking at the diversity of characters. So one person said, have a number of people emerge, including, you know, women, different races, disabilities, a sense of people working together. The user experience ratings for that were again quite good. So a median of 9 for usefulness, a median of 8 for desirability, 8 for clarity, and median of 9 for credibility. So then based on that those findings, then we took that, we synthesized those findings, and then we created sound effects, an audio track, and then we applied the stop motion felt animation style. Okay, so hopefully this will play. It played earlier, but you know Zoom, when you want it to work, it doesn't. So hopefully it will. Sure, maybe just stick a hand up if it's not working sound-wise. But I'm going to play the final video for you here, and hopefully you can hear it and see it.
In the 19th century, we made great progress in health through the provision of clean, clear water. In the 21st century, we will make great progress in health through clean, clear information. Today, evidence synthesis helps us do this. Evidence synthesis is a tool used by researchers, healthcare providers, and others every day and plays a really important role in making informed decisions about our healthcare. We often hear in the news or media about exciting or controversial new findings from the latest study or trial. However, it's very important that we don't focus on one single study or piece of evidence to make healthcare decisions. One study on its own can be inaccurate or misleading, and it may not always give the full picture. Using evidence synthesis is a way of making sure that your views and healthcare decisions are based on the findings of lots of studies, rather than just one.
But what exactly is evidence synthesis?
Evidence syntheses, also often called systematic reviews, are a way of compiling information from multiple studies that have looked at the same topic and come to an overall understanding of the results. This can include looking at how effective a certain treatment or drug is, what people's views or experiences of that treatment may be, or their understanding of living with a certain health condition. And doing evidence synthesis can save lives. For example, steroids given to women who are about to give birth prematurely can save the life of the newborn. But this treatment wasn't routinely put into practice until the results of all the individual clinical trials were brought together. It was only when this evidence synthesis was done that the overall benefits became clear, that the steroids saved the lives of premature babies. There are many types of evidence syntheses. However, all evidence syntheses or reviews share the same aim: to provide users, whether they are members of the public, researchers, healthcare providers, or patients and their carers, with clean, clear, trustworthy, and useful information. But not all evidence syntheses are equal.
So how can we tell a good one from a not so good one?
Here are some points to keep in mind. How did the review team search for the studies that they included? Were they consistent in deciding which studies to include and which to exclude? How did they choose which results they would highlight? How reliable, trustworthy, and recent were the studies they included? How useful is this review for you and other people like you? Did the research team clearly describe what they did and how they reached their overall conclusions? So the next time you're looking at an evidence synthesis, try and remember these key points. In short, evidence synthesis has an important role to play in informing how healthcare decisions are made. Now that you know and understand how important it is, what exactly evidence synthesis is, and how it can impact your life, hopefully you should feel equipped in using research to make more informed decisions about your healthcare. Good places to find evidence syntheses written for the public are Cochrane Plain Language Summaries and Campbell Collaboration Plain Language Summaries. More sources can be found at the end of this video. And remember, when you come across a review, don't forget to check its quality. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please let us know and like and share it. If you'd like to learn more, check out the links in the description.
Okay, so that was the video there. And I suppose in terms of then kind of what's happened since, or what do we feel the impact of it has been. So in terms of its impact on a public and patient audience, we've had over 19,000 views so far of the video. And the average view duration is over 2 minutes. So the video is about 3 minutes in total, and I'm told that's a pretty good stat if people are still, or if people are listening kind of around 60% or 70% of whatever the way through. So anyway, so it's also the 10th most viewed video on the Cochrane YouTube out of 506 videos. It's been translated into German and Spanish, and we're currently exploring a Norwegian translation. It's been used in patient and public involvement training globally. So, for example, the COVID Network in Canada used it, as did SPORE Evidence Alliance in their patient public involvement training. In terms of the KT literature, we also published a paper on the user-centered design approach, which was published in Digital Health at the start of this year. And we feel this gives an example of how to systematically develop an impactful KT resource to explain a complex topic with limited resources. So this was an 8-week summer student project with a budget of €2,000 to fund Chris to work on it. And I suppose it also, we feel it kind of gives a detailed example of how to involve public contributors through user-centered methods. And we feel that this process really helped enhance its credibility, clarity, and the usefulness of the resource. So just some final reflections, I suppose, on the project and things I, think were good and things I think I would have done differently. I suppose I think in particular the fact that it was kind of backed by Cochrane Ireland meant that kind of, I think starting off, we had kind of a good credible source to kind of work from. And we also then had kind of good networks then internationally and nationally in terms of helping the reach of the video. I found the KT Planning Primer template and the user-centered design methods themselves very useful. So when we set out to do this project initially, we kind of just wanted to make a video, but then we kind of, being the group that we are, we kind of wanted to, well, how do we make it in the most evidence-based possible and systematically and structured way? So we found these methods particularly useful. With that in mind, I suppose we kind of felt, rather than just building, developing a video that would hopefully be an impactful KT resource, we kind of built in this kind of research piece around that, so that we also had an academic output that would hopefully add to the literature and then give other people kind of a template that they could use to build on or to kind of advance them from there. I suppose we found that working with public audiences does require substantial time and planning in terms of kind of helping even people understand what we were trying to ask them to do. And I guess if we had more money and time and hindsight, a few things that might have changed would be to try and see if we could get public involvement earlier. So we brought them in kind of once we had the storyboard and the script developed. But it could have been nicer to see, could we have brought them in very early on in terms of that piece of it, to have their involvement for the very, very start, the idea generation phase, and helping us fill out the planning primer template. But I think that, and from some of the methods work we've done with PPI stuff, that would have required a lot more kind of resources and capacity building and training for people to do that meaningfully. Some aspects I think we probably could have had a bit more of a systematic approach to. So for the analysis and refinement phases. So for example, we could have probably used content analysis a bit more strictly in terms of when we were refining and synthesizing that feedback. We could have looked to use NVivo or something like that to help that transparency of that and keep that audit trail for how we brought that data together. Again, we could have toyed around with more iterative cycles. So we only did 2 because again, we were kind of limited in time and stuff. It would have been interesting to see, would we have gotten different results or different findings if we had more cycles? Like, would we have increased the view duration a little bit? Could we have made the video more succinct? Would that have helped with the view duration, that type of thing? And then I suppose future steps, then we'd be looking to kind of explore, well, is it actually effective in terms of helping people make better decisions, or even a step before that, is it helpful in terms of their understanding and knowledge? And that we could maybe look to explore that for other methodological topics in the same method. So I suppose that's the kind of the final piece. Just to like to acknowledge Evidence Synthesis Ireland for their summer studentship funding, which helped Chris work on the project, which, as I say, was really important and valuable. And then a final little plug just for our new masters. If anybody wants a master's or a new master's, it's never too late to do another master's. So applications are now open for our new Master in Evidence-Based Future Healthcare for September 2024. It's a fully online course. You can stay in Newcastle, and the timelines will mostly be asynchronous with some synchronous content. And actually I checked the times and it actually works for people based in the Sydney, Newcastle area. So there you go. So you can check it out there at tinyurl.com /EBFH care. So that I think is everything. So I'd like to thank you all very much for listening. Really, really brilliant to see so many people online and so many people registered. I'm delighted to be here in lovely Newcastle again. And thanks so much to Nick and Belinda and Beck Thompson and all the team for helping set this up. So really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
Thank you, Elaine. That was fantastic. So we do have time, like lots of time here for questions. I mean, I guess I was just, my immediate reflection was, for those of us who work in our methods, trying to explain to people what we do is actually sometimes really hard, and putting it in an interesting way. And so I think, watching that, it's like it's accessible to everyone to help, I guess, understand and what we do. I'm assuming this was kind of done during the COVID era, where, like you said at the start, there was so much disinformation being thrown around. And did you have any reflections or, I guess any feedback during the participant, cycles of kind of light bulb moments of, this helps me, I guess, understand a little bit more of what I should be listening to?
Say that last bit again, sorry, Nick.
Of what they should be listening to, you know, where they're getting in their information from. Like you said, it was so much stuff getting thrown around at that time. And I know you obviously worked on COVID. Like, do you have any insights for that of kind of less anecdotal impact?
Yeah, so I suppose so we actually did this before COVID. So we did this in just before COVID, actually, the summer of 2019. So it was before COVID hit. So it would probably be interesting to have done it now or during COVID to see, would it have been a very different group? We found that the video really took off during COVID. So, you know, it kind of came out at the end of, say, September 2019, and it kind of was tipping along and stuff. But then all of a sudden during COVID, the views really shot up. So that in itself, I suppose, is quite interesting in terms of people helping people understand the whole idea of, you know, one study on its own versus a synthesized study. So I think from us, when we were doing the interviews and working with the kind of the user groups, I think that was kind of the key thing that was really interesting, was that people hadn't really a concept of, oh, actually, yeah, you know, it's about all the studies and bringing them together and kind of making a proper way of bringing all those studies together so that it's an unbiased way. So because I think, like, a lot of people, like, and the people in our group were kind of, you know, and this is probably like another thing we could have explored differently, would be like people in our sample group they're well read, well educated. So I think that would be something we could explore. Definitely would be, you know, a much more diverse group of participants. But they, even for this group, they kind of hadn't really thought about that piece of, oh yeah, one study that they see in the paper versus how do we bring all these studies together to see what they're all saying in a methodologically sound way. So for me, that was kind of interesting, that I hadn't really thought about. That would be quite new for them, say.
Yeah, great. I was just going to say, if you stop sharing your screen, then you'll be able to see everyone's faces. Perfect. And if people want to come off, open their cameras. So we do have some questions. So Belinda had asked that about hearing some more detail about the Think Aloud interviews, and I kind of had scribbled the same thing there. I mean, I know that's you know, a method used, and Belinda, if you want to jump in to give more detail, but yeah, anything. I mean, I was wondering, are they prompted, or is it literally they're just sitting there with the screen, just whatever comes to their mind? But Belinda, it's your question.
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up for me, Nick. I was a bit fascinated by whether it's completely just up to the participant to share whatever they're feeling while they're doing something, or whether there's a little bit of structure, and how you and your team handled it, Elaine. How did you actually do those Think Aloud interviews, and how did you find them?
Find the videos, as opposed to how we actually find the people, is it? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. How did you find how the participants participated, I guess, in that Think Aloud interview? Because I'm assuming probably they hadn't done it before. It was probably new to them. So did you find that they felt comfortable? And then did you find that what came out of it, the sort of feedback that you got, how useful was it?
Yeah, so we did have a kind of a structured, like a kind of a very lightly structured, kind of like a semi-structured interview guide, but very light prompts, say. But basically then, where we were kind of, say, the first round where we kind of gave them the script and the storyboard, and we kind of let them then just kind of look through it themselves, and we kind of had prompt them. So we had in the kind of the guide at the start, we said, you know, this is a Think Aloud interview, so we want to hear what you're thinking as you're working through the resource. So there's no right or wrong answers, and we just want your, you know, to kind of you to freely speak what you're thinking at the time, and that's the piece that's most important to us. And then if they were kind of, so that was kind of the bit that we said at the start, and then we gave them the kind of the script and the storyboard, and then they kind of like read through it and were kind of making notes aloud as they'd read through it and say, oh, you know, that bit there now, I'm not sure if I understand that bit. And then there was kind of, we used those light prompts then as they worked through it in terms of, well, tell me a little bit more about this piece here, what do you think of this? So if we felt that they were quiet, so we kind of tried to leave them kind of, you know, completely alone, but we had prompts then that we kind of used if we felt that they were being too quiet, say, for example. But they were pretty comfortable with them, so we did them. So Chris did them. He did them either in the phone or over the phone or in person, so depending where they were and in terms of ease. And then he would have made notes for himself as well. So as moderator, so he moderated them with his notes. So so he would have picked up on kind of some nonverbal type stuff as well with that. The nonverbal stuff we didn't really use as much. It wasn't, I suppose, as useful as the kind of the verbal feedback that they would have kind of, I suppose, spoken through. And that was kind of more easy to capture, I suppose. But it was things like, oh yeah, I'd shorten that sentence there, or this, yeah, I'd probably put a little, you know, picture in here of that or something like that. Or this visual doesn't quite explain what I'm thinking of in terms of the words. But yeah, so it was an interesting kind of method. I'd like to use it again. So again, for something like this, I think it's really nice. It's kind of, I suppose, yeah, you're kind of, it's a little bit like semi-structured, you know, the usual interviews, but it's more directed at a specific resource or a specific thing. And you're hoping to kind of capture some of that maybe less immediately thought about stuff. So the kind of stuff that they say without thinking so much about. But yeah, a bit of kind of practice with those and getting them kind of comfortable with them and getting yourself comfortable with them. But I'd definitely use them again for sure.
And Elaine, did anything kind of unexpected or like emerge from that? Was there anything that you kind of hadn't thought of that hearing the participants work through it, you just went kind of through you?
I think there were certain things we thought were well explained in terms of like what an evidence synthesis was, and we had a lot more kind of, I suppose we were a lot more technical in the first storyboard and script. We were a bit more like you know, like, oh, they go and search databases and then they do, you know, so we were much more like we were more academic audience, really. We were like, oh, this is how they're done and stuff. And whereas we kind of realized, okay, we really need to pare it back to what are the key bits of it. So that was the key thing. One of the things that we had thought was great at the time was we had, so the bits about the quality of the review, we had it kind of done as like a little mnemonic, like SC or UUB, like, and that we'd scrub the quality of the review. And then I think we thought that was great. And I think they were like, no, it's too much. It's too complicated. So we ditched that altogether. So a few things like that we thought were maybe, oh, this is good. And they were like, no. So that was helpful.
I'm going to admit, when I watched the video, I went back and went, oh, does that spell out a word?
See, I thought it would have worked, but no.
Yeah. No, academics. We do have another question here. So, and I guess this is something, you know, we are getting told to push our research on different platforms and to do, you know, to make it more accessible. And so Alison asked the question, how did you decide on a video format, for example, over other formats like written or podcasts, for example?
Yeah, I suppose we had kind of decided from the outset that we would do a video. So why did we decide that? I guess we felt that it would be the most kind of accessible broadly, the most maybe shareable. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm trying to think back to why we had decided video initially. Because once we had decided on a video, then we kind of looked into like, what's the evidence behind how long they should be, how, you know, where you should kind of post them, where they should be held, that type of thing. But in terms of why we decided video over written, not sure really, to be honest. I don't think that was our most evidence-based decision. I think that was kind of like, oh, I'd like, videos are kind of cool, we'll do a video. But yeah, so I don't think there was much evidence underpinning that decision, unfortunately. But yeah, I think you could do a nice podcast as well. I think Cochrane probably do a lot of those, and maybe that's why we kind of felt like a video would be kind of a nice one. We had kind of looked to see what else was out there in terms of were there videos like this already, and a lot of the videos explaining evidence synthesis were focused at an academic audience. So Cochrane have one which is explaining systematic reviews, but it's quite dense, and it's kind of more, we felt more kind of academically focused than we wanted this one to be. So yeah, so I think that was kind of our main rationale underpinning that. So
right. Does anyone want to directly ask a question before I've got a few more, so I don't want to hog the, feel free just to take yourself off mute and ask. Everyone's too shy.
I think the presentation was shorter than I had thought it would be. So when I was running through it, I was like, oh, this looks very long. So I kind of snipped up a few bits to make it faster, but I think I might snip too much.
Yeah, that's good. So I've got, so, you know, you said the video's been viewed 19,000 times. And so I think sometimes our fear is that we will create these things and then they'll just sit, they'll, you know, sit on a platform and no one else will use it. So what strategies did you put around it to push it out, to get, you know, to get it viewed?
That's a good question. So we have it on, so it's housed on 3 YouTube accounts. So it's on the Evidence Synthesis Ireland one. I think it has about 3,000 views there. It's on Cochrane Austria, who translated into German. So it's about 500 or 600 there. And then it's on Cochrane, where it has the majority of ones. So we initially put it on the ESI, the Evidence Synthesis Ireland YouTube. But then I think one of the biggest reasons that it got so much reach was because we asked Cochrane, because within Cochrane Ireland, we asked them to house it on their website, or on their YouTube channel. And I think that because they have so much, they have such international reach, I think that really helped drive up the views. I guess we still didn't expect it to do as well as it did. Like, as I said, it's the 10th most viewed of the 506 videos on Cochrane's YouTube. And like, a lot of them are kind of older, so they've been sitting there for longer. So the reason I think it did maybe so well is because it's so, I think, or I feel, or hope anyway, that it is quite simple. Like, we actually, so the 2 little boys who voiced the questions in the video are Chris's little brothers, and they were our child testers who we did the user testing with. And they could actually understand it. So I think one of the reasons it was so, like, it's been viewed so many times is because it's that simple, and because I suppose the graphics are nice to kind of look at. It's easy to kind of to work through. So then I think it got picked up by different PPI groups and patient public involvement groups. So we would have pushed it a little bit in terms of our own Twitter, and I think we sent it to a couple of groups. Say we emailed it out, but to be honest, we didn't do a huge amount of that. Once we had kind of sent it to Cochrane and it just kind of started to get views, it kind of seemed to kind of spiral from there. We've presented it at a couple of conferences, and I know one of the conferences that we presented at was an online conference during COVID, and someone at the conference was the person who contacted us after and said, I'd like to translate this into Spanish. So that's kind of maybe one of the other things. I think the credible source thing, to be honest, and the networks, so that it comes from Cochrane, which is quite a reputable kind of name, and they have good networks for helping spread it. And then the fact that the resource itself is pretty easy to understand and pretty graphically appealing. I think they're the main things, I think.
Excellent. I also just have a quick question about the translation. So as we move into, like, leading a lot of international groups or collaborating with, groups from around the world, this is something that's emerging for us about making sure we're being more accessible to lower middle income countries, non-English speaking countries. And that process of the translation, like, is it, I don't know, any insights you've had and learnings from that process? Is it out of your hands, or, how much involvement do you have in that?
So in terms of that, I guess it's out of your hands in a certain way, because I don't have the language to know that the Spanish translation is word for word perfect, and the same with the German one. So I guess kind of once people approach you and then say, is it okay if we translate into this language? Again, Cochrane Austria were the people who approached us, and I was like, okay, they're reputable. I trust them to kind of do a good job in it. And the same with the person who approached us about the Spanish translation. I thought it was a spam email first, to be honest, and then I kind of checked her out online, and she's like a consumer who doesn't actually even work in research, but she's works in kind of more of a knowledge translation type role. So kind of once I checked her out and felt that she's not going to use it for nefarious purposes or whatever, that I kind of felt go for it. And then I think it is kind of out of your hands a little bit, and I kind of think that's what we wanted it to be, was that it would be a resource that people could use, and as long as it was for a good purpose, and that I couldn't see how they could twist it too much, that we were kind of happy for it to go out of our hands and to be used whatever we people wanted. So
I can see Vanessa's put a question in the chat. How have you used social media in promoting the video? So you kind of mentioned, I guess, Twitter, but
Twitter was it really, actually, to be honest. I think, well, maybe Cochrane, I think, might have pushed it on their Instagram once or twice. But I think Twitter was the main way that we used it. And then, like I say, it kind of nearly took off in a way. But I'm trying to think, did we use anything else? Not really. No, it was mostly just Twitter. Yeah. So it was, again, I suppose we feel, I guess, the impact it's had for the level of simplicity. Like, we didn't have major resources in terms of developing it or disseminating it afterwards. We kind of just had, Twitter and maybe a couple of conference presentations, and then from kind of that minimal amount of kind of effort pushing it out, it's kind of taken off itself. And I think that's due to the quality of the video itself, I think.
excellent. Julia's asked a question on behalf of every female in the room who's ever taken a career break. So you mentioned that the project was a labour of love, and the challenges to that not being a paid component of your work, and your maternity leave breaks. So she'd asked any tips or learnings around how you progressed labours of love.
Jesus, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask about that, but I don't know. I suppose just doing your best to try and kind of keep things going. I think working with a lovely team is really nice. So a team that you can kind of, lean on in certain times, and a team who also won't hound you if something isn't done or isn't out, or that they're, not depending on it for something is good. I've found kind of, I suppose, kind of student kind of input. So like any student I work with, I try and always make sure that we treat them really well, in terms of we're upfront about how much funding we have. But then if there's other things that we can do, like, get them to a conference, or, give them good references after, that we'll do all of that. So then that, I suppose, kind of helps us get good students to, and then, so the labour of love I was talking about, that Fidelity Scoping. So Daphne Toe was one of the people I mentioned on the group, and she got a Canadian CIHR fellowship to come over. She was finishing off her master's. I'd worked with her in her master's, and then she got a Canadian fellowship to come over, and she's been working on the scoping review with us. So again, trying to kind of get extra pair of hands to help you push it on a little bit. But yeah, then a good team, I think, is important, and not being too hard on yourself as well. There's been projects. The last time I was in Sydney, I had great meetings with people in Sydney, and I'm not naming names because I'm embarrassed with the project never taking off. Had a great idea for a lovely project, and then things were just too busy, and I had to kind of just let it slide. And I feel guilty kind of still, but I try not to beat myself up too much about the fact that I have to let that project slide, because I suppose you can't do everything, and you can only do a certain amount. And then I think I suppose keeping a strategic eye on what you need to focus on, and what things you can maybe let drop kindly if it's not a bad drop, and then keeping the other things going, I think, is the main thing. So, but I'm probably not the best person to ask. Nick is a better person to ask about that.
No, guilt is that little constant. It's the worst emotion, and it just sits on your shoulder all day. It's worst. Julie, was there anything else you wanted to add on for that?
I was just going to say thank you for such a human response, like just acknowledging, and Nicole, the way you asked that question, like I think, yeah, every woman in this space has a query about, well, how do you hold all the balls up, and how do you move things, I guess, that you're passionate about, but you might not have all the resources in place, like funding or, things to move little seedlings of project ideas. So, and thanks for a great talk.
Oh, thanks very much. Thanks so much for coming on. It's great to hear from everyone.
And Elaine, we've got probably time for this one last question. And again, I think probably had similar thoughts around, you had a tiny budget. So how did you produce the video? Was it an external provider, a company that used it, or did you do it yourselves?
So we did it ourselves. And I guess part of the success of doing that then was, again, building the team. So one of the people on the team, I hadn't actually mentioned her name at the start, just for purpose of time, was Elle Putnam. So she was based in the university's graphic media, or I can't remember exactly. So arts department, and I think graphic media and video production was her specialty. So we asked her, would she help being involved from the start and help supervise Chris in terms of the technical elements of the video. So she was kind of helping lead that side of things. So yeah, so I guess we were lucky in the team that we had. It was a really nice team to work with, and people were really good, I suppose, as well. I guess kind of wasn't accidentally done that way. It kind of made sure that the team was strong and that we had kind of the right people that would be able to and willing to give time to help Chris kind of learn about the tech aspects, and then to that we would kind of help then bring the methodology piece and the systematic piece. Also, Chris was exceptional. He was a very, very good student. He was medical background, but he was also interested in tech stuff. So he was, it was kind of, he really wanted to learn about like putting stuff like that, the video together. So that was a key piece as well. So yeah, so I think a good team, to be honest, was the key there.
And if I can just quickly ask one more question. So here in our fellowship schemes, we really have to identify our top 10 publications, and you've got to report on the impact of those papers. And so do you know, like, for the paper that this is reported on, like citations or download, like, do you think it's impacted on that?
Yeah, it's so funny, like, because the paper is the least important piece of this project to me, so like, and like, it's in digital media, which is like a decent impact factor. It's 4 point something or other, whatever, it's a good journal. I don't know what, like, it's only, I went on mat leave, so the paper didn't come out until the start of this year, and then so I don't know if it's been cited much, or if it's had many downloads and stuff. I haven't really looked, to be honest, but yeah, it's funny. It's kind of nearly like I did the paper, I suppose. Yeah, so to me, the paper has been the least impactful piece of the whole project so far, and the bits that I'm most proud of are the views and the fact that it's been used and put in training for members of the public, and that piece of it. So like, it would be great, and hopefully will be great when the paper kind of gets up and running and going. But yeah, I haven't actually put much effort even into like tweeting about the paper, to be honest. I probably should do that. Mental note to self, put on the to-do list. But yeah, it's funny. The paper is kind of, for me, is like that'll help keep the funders and the people who like promote you or not, that'll keep them happy. But for me, the fact that it's going out into the world, doing its own thing, and kind of is, being used by people, for me, that's the more important thing.
Yeah, you wonder, like, could it drive people there, or do they go, I've watched the video now, I don't need to read the paper, we're done?
Yeah, I mean, and like, we could do a video about the making of the but that's a step too far, I think. But yeah, so it will be interesting to see how the paper gets on in terms of who reads it, and is it useful. Like, I would love to see more KT resources being developed in like a systematic way, in using like good structures, and like ours is far from like a gold standard at all. Like, we could definitely take ours and improve it, but I'd love to see more examples of things like, this is how because you see really good glossy resources all the time, and you're like, oh, that's a really interesting leaflet, but there's never any underpinning in terms of, well, how did you decide on this piece, and the color and the design piece of it and all that, and there is nice like work out in terms of like arts-based KT resources and stuff, and that kind of thing. So it would be, yeah, it'd be nice to see more of that, I suppose, as much as possible.
All right, I'll just check that there's no other burning questions from anyone on the online. No? Well, if not, we'll leave it there. So thank you so much, Elaine. I know that you're tapping into some family time to do this for us. And I really appreciate it. It's such a thrill to have you here. And I guess if people have any other questions or want to reach out to Elaine, I think you had your contact details on the slide, but you could just contact either Belinda or I, and we're happy to connect you in.
Yeah, and please do, if anyone ever is in Galway and you want to like meet up with researchers, like doesn't have to be me at all. Like, you know, meet up with, I can put you in contact with people or whatever. So, you know, don't be a stranger. So if you're over that far, you may as well get some academic stuff out of it as well. So.
Thanks so much, Elaine. Thanks everyone for joining in. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you.
Bye. So B and Elaine, and we just stay